Gaudy. So Gaudy. Gaudy stats. Good God, that's Gaudy. Welcome to Gaudy Stats
with Ben Simmons.
What's on the menu, Benny boy?
On today's pod, I welcome in, once again, my good friend Samuelson. We talk about gaudy statistical performances by the great Billy Volek, and the legendary, the myth, God of the Gridiron, Drew Bennett. They had a 3-game stretch in 2004 that was just beyond gaudy. It was filthy, disgusting, in fact. We get into that. Also, we touch on the amazing season that Todd Gurley's having this year and how it relates to other great seasons. Sam details multiple amazing gaudy stat seasons from running backs of yore. Talks about their fantasy points, but also their receiving, rushing, you name it. And we talk about, as well, the great LaDainian Tomlinson, how he perhaps, when it comes to fantasy, is the greatest running back of all time on a per-season basis. And you look at his output, and he has, as Sam details, perhaps the greatest fantasy season of all time. A lot is in this podcast. It's a fill to the brim, if you will. It's a buffet. It's all you can eat. That's what we do here. So there's not much room for side dishes, but maybe some sauce on top. I'm thinking a little. You ever had that Trappy's brand hot sauce from Louisiana? It's delicious. You uncork the little top and you pour it all over. So that's what I'm going to do with this one. I'm just going to pour hot sauce all over the place. Give it that nice, tangy, spicy, sweet taste. And, it's good. I'm going to eat it all up with a tall glass of warm milk. Just kidding. That's disgusting. No, probably have like some, some water with it. Let's get to the podcast. Let's hit it.
What's up, man?
Hello, Samuel. How are you, my friend?
How are you doing?
I'm good.
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm great. I'm sipping on some tea. A little bit under the weather. I think my allergies are kind of acting up right now. But I got a little pick-me-up this morning. And
oh, yeah?
Yeah. I looked at a 3-game stretch that Billy Volek had in 2004.
Yeah. That's better than any medication or any kind of herbal remedy you could have, probably.
Yeah, any kind of syringe that I could thrust into my buttocks to give me that perky can-do attitude.
That's right. Yeah.
Man, I don't know. So Sam and I have been kind of communicating about what to do for our next podcast, and in the early stages when I first started doing the podcast, somebody brought up Billy Volek, Drew Bennett, this amazing run they had at the end of the 2004 season. Who was that, Sam? Was that you, or was that?
I think it was me, but I'm not totally sure. But I think I brought it up. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's truly amazing. I don't know who had them in our fantasy league. And they might have actually been a little heartbroken at the end of it because in weeks 15 and 16 of that year, they didn't click. They weren't on all cylinders. Maybe the matchups didn't line up correctly. They looks like they played Denver and Detroit those last 2 games. But excuse me. It was but the 3 games before that were stellar. All right, and I'm just going to jump right into it.
Sure. Can I before you jump in?
Sure.
I actually had Drew Bennett that year in our league.
Oh God.
But if my memory is serving me correctly, then I did not make the playoffs. And I remember the Monday night game that you're gonna talk about, because I had already been eliminated from the playoffs, and it was a game where we were in college, right? I was in college. I had taken the last of my finals or finished the last final paper or whatever, but I hadn't driven home yet. So I was still at college, but I was done with my work and I was waiting to go home. And I just remember very vividly turning on this mostly meaningless game between the Titans and the Chiefs, more or less because it was on, and it's like, might as well watch. And I had no idea when I just turned it on, it was going to be on in the background as I was sort of trying to decompress from the end of a semester. I had no idea the fireworks that awaited me that night.
Yeah, and that was a high-scoring game. I'm actually looking at the box score right now. Larry Johnson, who we touched on probably for too long in a previous podcast, rushed 7 times, Sam. He rushed 7 times for 104 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Wow. And so this would have been, he had those 2 great years, and this would have been the year before that, right? Because his 2 great years were 05 and 06, I think.
Yeah.
So he was this emerging star, and I guess at that point they were sort of in this weird, awkward place between Priest Holmes and Larry Johnson, right? I think that's.
Yeah. I think that sounds about right to me. And yeah, we will get into Priest Holmes at some point. Our friend Chris Kemp was livid. Surprisingly, was angry when I talked to him. You could just hear the frustration in his voice that we did not touch on Priest Holmes in our in our running back pass catching running back pod. But we'll get into Priest Holmes.
It was very rude of us to overlook every running back who's ever caught a pass.
Yeah.
We're sorry, Chris. We're sorry we let you down, buddy.
We're sorry about that. Oh God, I need to. I need like a neti pot or something. I'm so congested right now. But
yeah, I also have a bit of a cold. Playing hurt.
That's right. Well, maybe we should set the stage a little bit. So Billy Volek came in to relieve who? Do you know? Can you guess? When he came in at the end of the season, I don't think he was originally the starting quarterback.
Well, I mean, I'm assuming. I mean, I
he's a well-known guy. He's a well-known guy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming it was McNair, right?
You assume correctly, sir.
Yeah, R.I.P. Steve McNair.
So McNair played, R.I.P. He was a lot of fun to watch, that guy. He was scrambler, but also a great pocket passer. I mean, he's really known for his pocket passing. He wasn't terribly fast, but he was very nifty. He was kind of like Ben Roethlisberger-esque in the way he could move around the pocket, and he could kind of, he could get that first down, but he wouldn't break off like a 50-yard run or something like Cam Newton or Vic or somebody. But
and I do think that a young Steve McNair was maybe a little more athletic than people give him credit for. I mean, by the time he was older, he was slow. But Deshaun Watson, just to bring a name up from recent years, his game reminds me a little bit of young McNair, of Air McNair. Maybe Deshaun Watson is a little bit better of a runner, but anyway, proceed. I'm sorry.
Oh no. Oh, this pod's all about tangents. In fact, one pod it'll be called the Tangent Pod, and we'll just start talking, and then we'll go off on multiple tangents. There'll be no actual topic. We'll just it'll be nothing but tangents. So, and I think the listeners will really enjoy that. They'll they'll just tune in. There'll be no set plan. There'll be actually no description on the podcast, like on the different platforms, like on iTunes. It'll just be a blank, and
you just say what's on your mind, and we go from there.
Yeah, it'll be great for like keyword searches and stuff. Like a lot of people will be able to find it.
Yeah.
Well, anyways,
we'll speak in the Rockwell voice when we do it.
Oh God, I listened to so much Rockwell after that pod. Too much, I would say.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm looking at McNair, his stats for that year. He only played in 8 games. He's having kind of a down year. 8 TDs, 9 interceptions, 23 rushes, 128 yards, and a TD. 1,343 yards. So he was injured, and I have not figured out what happened, like what kind of injury it was. Do you remember by any chance?
I don't, but I as durable as he was, or as tough of a reputation as he had, as much of a reputation as he had for being tough, I should say. He had to have been pretty hurt to have sat out half the season.
I know.
Right?
He was tough as nails, that guy.
He was. I don't remember exactly what the issue was.
Yeah, and I'm a little too lazy at this point to look it up, but because we're all about the stats, we're not gonna just hold us to talking about the stats, all right? Because we're not gonna look up all the little details about how he got injured, if he tore his ACL, if he shattered his heel bone. We're not healthcare professionals. I know. I mean, did his penis get ripped off by Dwight Freeney? We don't know what happened to the guy, but he missed half the season. And enter Billy Volek. All right. The great Billy Volek. This is by far, if you look at his career stats, this year was his shining moment. And to be more specific, that it was really a 4-game stretch. It was let's see, it was week 9 and then week 12, 13, and 14. So that's when he had his best games. But we're really going to focus in on week 12, 13, and 14 because these stats, they're gaudy. I tell you what. I mean, really for Volek, it's 13 and 14, but because they coincide with Drew Bennett's, how would you put it? Just explosion, volcanic, just eruption. And it's better to think of them in tandem because of their work together. Yes, their collaborative effort. Yes, they were reportedly the best of buds. They had lockers beside each other. They took a lot of steam baths together. They routinely were in ice baths together after the games. They both liked Hall & Oates, and they'd listen to it in the locker room. Yes, they did that. That's been reported. They also rode a tandem bike back to the 2-bedroom apartment. Actually, I think it was a 1-bedroom apartment that they shared. That was short ways away from the practice facility. These guys were buds, and everything just started to click for them during this section of the season. And I'm not saying that Drew Bennett. I mean, he was putting up decent numbers for the early part of the year as well. I mean, he had some great games. For example, one of those great games just happened to be week 9 with Billy Volek, and these guys just had a connection. In that game, they were playing Chicago. They lost that game. 17-19, but Billy Volek had 334 yards and 2 touchdowns. All right, and our boy Drew Bennett had 6 catches for 148 yards and a touchdown on 11 targets, and that was just kind of like a little taste of what was to come later in the season, Sam.
Yeah.
So,
and Drew Bennett, by the way, he would definitely. I mean, that 2004 season, that would definitely qualify as an outlier.
yeah.
You look at the rest of his career, and he never really came close to replicating anything from like that 04 season for the rest of his career. I believe he eventually ended up with the Rams. I think the Rams actually signed him to a pretty sizable contract.
Oh, yeah.
And he was, but I mean, they were basically paying for stats that he had already put up. And he never regained that form.
Yeah. I mean, he put up 144 targets for 80 catches, 1,247 yards, and 11 touchdowns in his 2004 season. And now I'm looking at it, 144 targets for only 80 catches. Is that good? Or is that bad or good? I mean, it's probably pretty good, I guess. Probably like
yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know what the average catch rate is.
Yeah.
I feel like that. I mean, if I think about it at first, it seems like that feels a little low, but I guess that's actually pretty. I think these days your top end receivers can expect to get 150, 160, 170 targets. And obviously, most of them aren't catching 120 passes or anything. So, you know, if you think of it as an average of maybe like 90 catches for 150, 160 targets, which is about whatever. I think that's 60%, a 60% catch to target rate or whatever.
Yeah.
80 on 144 isn't like spectacular, but it's not. I don't think it's considered bad.
Yeah, and he was playing outside too. He wasn't like a slot receiver or a running back who have naturally higher catch rates because they're getting shorter passes, like dump offs, stuff like that. So yeah, I mean it makes sense.
No, he was an outsider. I mean he was a
big boy,
physical 6'3" guy who would
6'5"
go up and he's 6'5". Excuse me.
Well, I'm looking at his measurables right now. 6'5".
I didn't realize.
206 pounds. And his full name is Andrew Russell Bennett. Just for all the people out there who wanted to know his full name.
Yeah. It's important.
Yeah, it's important to touch on those things. Man, this okay. So I feel like I might have drafted him after this season. I don't know if I drafted him in our league, but maybe in another league. I was enamored. This 3-game. It was just. You know, when a player starts to heat up, and especially in football, when they get hot, and there's been players who didn't have amazing careers that have stretches like this. Notably, Muhsin Muhammad. He's another player who heated up, and I had him in fantasy one year. He had a pretty damn good career, I would say. He doesn't really fall in like a Drew Bennett category, but he had a stretch where he, week after week, 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, it was like at least a touchdown every week. Similar to kind of what happened recently with Keenan Allen, where he was getting like 10 receptions for over 100 yards and a touchdown or more every week there for a little while. He was kind of on a nice little streak there. So that's kind of what happened here with Bennett.
Excuse me. Yeah.
Yeah, and okay, so let's start going through these games. All right, we touched on the Kansas City game briefly, and the funny thing is, all these games were losses. Okay, they lost every single one of these games that we're about to talk to you about. But all we care about are the stats. All right.
Yeah, and the Kansas City one, honestly, is the only one that I really remember all that well, just because it was singled out as a national TV game on Monday night, and because it was gaudy as all hell, and additionally, it was gaudy as all hell with these players who you don't It wasn't Peyton Manning doing it, or Marvin Harrison. It was these guys who really had not, with the exception of that half season preceding, I guess, had not demonstrated that they were capable necessarily of exploding like Mount Fuji, the way that you're referring to.
Yeah. It's just an eruption. And speaking of Peyton Manning, the Titans were at the Colts for the first game. This is Week 12, December 5th, 2004. All right.
Yeah.
And Peyton,
very professional segue by you there.
Hey, well, I'm trying to improve my podcasting abilities. I've been
watching the film,
watching a lot of
film.
film.
In the film room.
Yeah. Yeah, I built a little film room for myself. It's a 3x3 room. I have to crouch down and get into it. Has no windows. I taped it all black. It's about 120 degrees in there, and
it's important.
I got a little condenser, like old style TV in there that it's all grainy. And I listen / watch film and try to correct my mistakes.
You have some devices that keep your eyes open as wide as they can be, a la Clockwork Orange.
Yeah, Clockwork Orange and
film.
Conspiracy Theory, starring Mel Gibson. He tapes his eyes open in that.
Oh man, did not expect Mel Gibson to come up on this pod, but this is what this podcast offers, Ben.
Yeah.
You could Conspiracy Theory or Ransom. Give me back my son.
Give me back my son.
At any moment.
Give me back my son.
We had a mutual friend. Who well, we won't mention him by name, but in the mid-aughts, in the 2000s, when he would drunk dial people, that was his go-to line.
Yeah.
He would drunk dial people and yell, "Give me back my son!" Which is a line from the 1996 Mel Gibson hit Ransom.
My favorite. Used to be one of my favorite movies. Seriously,
really?
I used to love that. Gary Sinise, at the top of his game. Just
his sort of weaselly villain role.
Had kind of a nasally voice. Anyways, okay. So this looked like a garbage time special. Billy Volek.
This game is in Indianapolis.
This is in Indianapolis. The final score, Sam, was 51-24.
Lord, yeah.
Colts won.
Yeah.
And just to zero in on that game log and look at some of the scoring that happened, it looks like it was actually got close early. So I take back what I say. It was not a garbage time special. It was close. It was close in the first half. It was actually like a 7-point differential. Indy was up 31-24, so it was a shootout.
Yeah.
The Titans did not score in the second half. They were blanked. And
so it was kind of the opposite of because when you read that score, I was thinking the Colts were up 48 to or 44 to nothing, and then in the third and fourth quarter, the Titans scored 3 touchdowns and a field goal. But it was the opposite of that.
It was what actually happened is Mike Vanderjagt, he kicked a field goal, but then Drew Bennett,
the idiot kicker.
The idiot kicker,
the liquored up idiot kicker.
The liquored up idiot kicker, as Peyton would call him. Drew Bennett was streaking across the field or up the sideline. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But Billy Volek hit him for 48 yards and a touchdown. Okay?
Yeah.
Marvin Harrison, 24-yard pass from Peyton. Then Drew Bennett comes back. A 28-yard pass from Billy Volek for another touchdown. Okay? So we've got long touch. This is all in the first quarter. Long touch.
So you have greats going back and forth. You have Manning and Harrison just going toe to toe with Volek and Bennett.
It's just, they're all at the peak of their powers here, and they're all just letting it all hang out. But the amount of scoring in this first quarter is kind of astounding. At the end of the first quarter, it was 24-17 Titans, and Billy Volek once again hit Drew Bennett for 48 yards for another touchdown. So Billy Volek has 3 touchdowns in the first quarter. Drew Bennett has 3 touchdowns in the first quarter, and they end up losing the game 51-24. And in fact, they don't score. It looks like they don't score another touchdown for the rest of the game.
Wow. So wait a minute. Hold on. Let me get this straight.
It's crazy.
Drew Bennett had 3 touchdown catches in 1 quarter?
Yes, he did. I'm looking at it. This is insane.
That has to be some kind of record for a single quarter for a receiver, right? I mean, maybe not. If that's not a record, it's close to it. I mean, the most fantasy points in a quarter by a receiver. I remember one year that I had Lee Evans, and the Bills were playing I believe they were playing at the Texans. They're playing down here. And Lee Evans had 2 80-yard touchdowns or 70-plus, 75-yard touchdowns.
He had so many long touchdowns.
In one half. We'll get to that some other time. But, yeah, that's a remarkable game by Drew.
Yeah.
And sorry, I don't want to leave you out, Billy. By Drew and Billy.
The funnier thing is, like, just really quick, going back to your Lee Evans comparison, is Drew finished. I'm on first name basis with him now. So Drew he finished with just 3 catches, all touchdowns, for 124 yards.
Yeah.
And so he never touched the ball again after that first quarter. They targeted him only 6 times. So you would think that maybe they should just repeatedly target Drew Bennett for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
But
every time you throw to him, he's going to score. They would have had. They could have scored 91 points if they'd thrown it to him 13 times.
Yeah. Just keep peppering. Target him 30 times. Just keep throwing the ball to Drew Bennett every single time.
Yeah. And it's surprising in retrospect. And this is something I'm going to touch on a little in a while, but it's surprising in retrospect that all of this could take place under the watchful eye of Jeff Fisher, who, in his later years as the Rams coach, was not known for having teams that were, shall we say, offensively proficient.
Yeah. He kind of outed himself later in his career as kind of a thick-headed coach.
As a dolt.
Yeah, I mean, it was the signs were always there, the evidence, the ducktail, the mullet, kind of the confused look on the field, not really calling weird timeouts, just general confusion on the sidelines. The evidence was always there, but it kind of materialized, came to the forefront more with his years with the Rams for sure. I remember watching the Hard Knocks on the Rams, and I don't know, I wasn't that impressed with Jeff, even though that show isn't like, it doesn't completely reveal all the details of a franchise, but you kind of get a vibe for the coaches, and I think that might have hurt his rep a little bit too, that show.
Right. I've never really watched Hard Knocks much, but I've kind of, the opinions of it I've heard have been sort of all over the map. Yeah,
I feel like there's backlash to it now. I think when it first came out, it was cool, but people are so used to seeing, behind the scenes footage. It doesn't have the feel that it used to.
I think that's probably right, and you look at how much Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and Snapchat, how much more prevalent all these things are than what was like the first year of Hard Knocks was probably like 07, 08, and you just had a window into this at that point that now is just sort of taken for granted, like a team could just post an exchange from the locker room or something behind the scenes on its Twitter account or on Snapchat. And in 2008, that wasn't a thing.
Yeah, and the only thing that separates that from Hard Knocks is Liev Schreiber's voiceover. So you're basically paying top dollar just to hear Liev, and also like crisp HD video. But you just kind of a trade-off there. I mean, some people would rather just get the footage for free and not have Liev Schreiber in their head, talking about how Jeff Fisher in the off season goes kayaking with his son and in a river in Wyoming or something.
Right.
So yeah, I mean,
that's. I mean,
hey, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? What are
you gonna do about that?
Yeah,
that's your HBO subscription, though, right?
Yeah, that's it.
You also save money if you don't want to watch Game of Thrones. You can just you're paying for the production value and all of the costs of the production. You could alternatively just watch the Browns.
If you just want to have deep emotional swings and
like gore and
just feel sad.
Yeah, gore and sort of defeat and endless struggle.
Yeah, it's true. It's like the White Walkers.
Many characters
or just life. Just beating the Browns.
I've never watched a single episode of Game of Thrones, but I know of it because it's so popular. But I know there's many characters coming in and out, cycling in and out.
A lot of death.
Kind of like the Browns, right?
Yeah. A lot of sadness and tragedy and death. So you're right. It's very similar now that I think about it.
People will randomly just get beheaded or have their heads crushed, sort of like the Browns. Okay, but you know what? I'm sorry. Why do I always bring up the?
That's because that's what this podcast is about. And you know what? I actually saw a funny. After we talked about the Browns and you brought up Hugh Jackson's horrific record, and I was like, oh, I kind of like him. And then really, it was like the next day, I saw a blurb coming out of Cleveland saying that he'd lost the locker room and everybody hated him, all the players hated him and he even Crowell had this amazing run recently. It's over a 50-yard run, and he said for some reason he wasn't impressed with the run. He just wasn't I don't know what's going through your coach's mind when you kind of I mean what is he trying to? He's taking a page out of Phil Jackson's book, Phil Jackson's GM book,
tough love.
I'm gonna disparage my players whenever given a chance, and I don't know.
I would say that tactic is a little more effective when your team is good.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think when your team is horrifically bad, I think when they're searching for any sort of hope, it's probably the worst thing you could possibly do. So maybe I might be changing my opinion on Mr. Hugh Jackson. The 1 week flip flop. I go from really liking him to thinking he's trash and he should probably be fired. So
I promise you that this is the last appearance I make. Or this is the last appearance I make for a while where I'm going to bring up the Browns because they deserve their time. They're a team too, but I just feel like I'm giving them way too proportionally to how much to sort of what the product they put on the field.
Yeah,
I'm giving them way too much time. So to steer back to Drew and Billy here for a second.
Yeah, because these guys, this is the top flight performers here. Billy Volek is on another level than the Browns. He's many levels ahead of the Browns. You look at the hierarchy of cool things, and Billy Volek. We'll focus more on him. And in that particular game, he didn't have that gaudy of a game. I'm looking at it right now. He had 269 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 INTs. So
which game is this? Sorry, remind me.
This is a game against Indy.
Okay, right, yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted
the one they lost 51-24.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So most of his production especially fantasy production, was in the first
Mhm.
quarter, and then he was shut out the rest of the game. And he didn't have a very good quarterback rating. He had, 88.9. Oh, but then Sam, the next game. This is when things start getting really interesting. Kansas City game that we touched on Monday night. It was just a statistical bonanza.
Both teams were 4-8 going into the game, I think.
Yes, and see, that's my favorite. Like, if you like gaudy stats, and you like for instance, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, but like when two teams that aren't very good kind of go at each other with like not much to lose, and there's not a lot of defense, and they're just like pouring on the points, and just like you see crazy stat lines,
games get very weird. Teams have nothing to play for, so they just start emptying out their playbook.
Yeah, and it also happens when like maybe they rest some of their starters, and then two guys who don't normally start get in there. Like a great example of that is I can't remember exactly what year, but when Matt Flynn was inserted into the Packers starting lineup in Week 17, I believe, against the Detroit Lions.
Yeah.
And we could almost do a whole podcast about that game. We won't do that. That's a little too crazy. But
the Matt Flynn podcast would sort of be like the Matt Maloney podcast that you and Dan referenced in the podcast you did recently.
Oh man,
Matt Flynn, he was a good player. Here are his starts. Okay, that's it for the Matt Flynn podcast. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. Have a blessed day. Okay, I'm looking up.
Well, Flynn and that game I'm talking about. Okay, so this was. Okay, what date was this exactly? Okay, I'm not sure exactly what date it was, but I think it was. Okay, yeah, it was January 1st, 2012. Okay, so you ring in the new year with Matt Flynn throwing for 6 touchdowns and 480 yards. Okay, and on the other side, Matthew Stafford had 520 yards and 5 touchdowns. Calvin Johnson had 11 catches for 244 yards and a touchdown. And your boy Jordy had 9 catches for 162 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, I'm looking at this now, 45-41. Yeah, so Matt Flynn.
Crazy.
Yeah. 6. So 520 and 480. These guys combined for exactly 1,000 yards passing. 11 touchdowns, 3 picks. We got any other good?
I mean, I'm looking at there was like barely any
Brandon
rushing.
Pettigrew.
Yeah.
They weren't running the ball.
Ryan Grant, Packers running back, had an 80-yard touchdown catch.
Yeah, Titus Young, 4 catches, 24 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Yeah. Scheffler got in there.
Tight end.
Yeah.
It's just this is a blast from the past.
Yeah, it was a crazy game, and kind of similar to what's happening here in this game. Like two teams that have losing records. They just that they meet on a fateful night, and they start just unloading on each other. In this game, Billy Volek. Okay, Sam. He threw for 40. Set the scene a little bit. This is December 13th, 2004. So, kind of similar time of year as we're in right now. Billy Volek threw the ball 43 times. All right?
Yep.
And he completed 29 passes, which is pretty good. For 426 yards and 4 touchdowns. All right? And for good measure, he had 24 rushing yards on 2 attempts. Yeah. Oh, and on the flip side, Mr. Drew Bennett. This was his crown jewel game of his career. This is the best game he ever had. I think by a long shot. The man was targeted 17 times. Okay, which is like any fantasy player loves to see a receiver getting targeted that many times.
Hmm.
And he caught 12 of them, so he had a great catch rate, 12 for 17, and he put up 233 receiving yards. Sam, all right,
It's really good.
233. Drew Bennett, okay,
Gaudy.
and 3 touchdowns. So he had three the previous week, and he has 3 this week. So he's at 6 touchdowns in 2 weeks. Okay,
Hmm.
extremely gaudy. We touched on Larry Johnson, what he did in that game. I think Trent Green had like three passing touchdowns.
Yeah, it looks like Eddie Kinnison had 2 catches for 67 yards and 2 touchdowns.
I love when that happens. Although I like
Speaking of lines where you only catch touchdowns.
yeah seriously.
Will Fuller for the Texans, and I believe Josh Doxson, but especially at one point this year, Will Fuller, when Deshaun Watson was still healthy, Will Fuller, he was injured at the start of the year, so he missed the first few games. But at one point in October, Will Fuller had like 8 catches on the year, and 5 of them were touchdowns.
I remember
which was
that.
just an absurd line to look at.
You know, it really is sad. I know you're not like a big Texans fan, but you live in Houston. You probably, when you live in a city of a team that's doing well, you kind of gravitate towards that team. It's happened to me before.
Yeah, sure.
So you probably, and there probably are a lot of, you probably know some Texans fans. It was just sad when Watson got hurt. I was really enjoying watching that team.
It sucked.
The stats were
he got hurt
gaudy.
in practice too, which was weird. It was like
yeah.
it was on like a Wednesday or Thursday that he just tore his ACL. So it wasn't like he got hurt in a game or anything. So it was off of the incredible game that they played at Seattle, where he went sort of toe to toe with Russell Wilson, which might have been. I mean, I would say if Patriots Steelers hadn't happened a couple weeks ago, that Texans Seahawks game was maybe the game of the year. Speaking of gaudy stat lines,
that was, yes, I'm gonna have to agree with you, and it was a shocking one too. I don't think the line was that high, like for the over under, and I think also a lot of people overestimated how good the Seahawks defense was because they've been so good in years past, but they've gotten lit up multiple times this year. But not there wasn't a game that they got lit up more than that game. That was, Deshaun Watson. It was kind of his coming out party in a way because it was supposedly against a really good defense. But I mean, I don't remember the stats. We should probably look up that game because I don't remember.
Well, there's a lot of buzz here for him and for this team, I think, because it just feels like they finally have a quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
So
did he tear his ACL? What did he do exactly?
Yeah, he tore his ACL.
Okay, he can come back from that.
Yeah. He tore it around like November 1st or so. Yeah. So he should be good to go for training camp next year, and just hope he stays healthy. I mean, he had some injury issues in college at Clemson, but it's just. There were a few years. I mean, I feel like I read things that talk about the Texans have never had a quarterback. I mean, Matt Schaub was pretty good for a couple years. It's more just that he when he tailed off, a lot of people remember his sort of decline.
The interceptions.
That makes them forget the 2 or 3 year stretch where he was pretty solid. But since that point, which you're probably talking like 2010, 2011, you really don't have, the Texans really have not had a reliable quarterback option before they drafted Watson. You sort of cycled between Hoyer and Brian Hoyer and Tom Savage and Brock Osweiler and all of these sort of not too appealing options at quarterback, and that has been reflected in the win-loss record. Although they did make the playoffs a couple times in the past few years with those quarterbacks. They went 9-7 several years in a row, but definitely a lot more buzz around the Texans now than ever before, because there's just a sense that they don't necessarily have the ceiling that they did have, where when it was like, okay, well, the defense is really good, but could they go and beat the Patriots or beat the Steelers? And, I think for several years now it's been like, well, they could play them tough. And the Texans played the Patriots tougher in the AFC playoffs last year than the Steelers did.
Yeah,
but
the defense
was
is nasty.
Always like, yeah, the defense is great when healthy, but it was always just sort of like, okay, but is the offense going to be able to keep pace? And the answer in years past has been no. With Deshaun Watson, I think it's certainly, you have to look at it and think, if he was this fearless and this effective as a rookie, as a 23-year-old player in the league at quarterback, I think the future is pretty bright.
Yeah, and whatever he was doing in practice when he tore his ACL, never have him do that again. Even if it was like he was eating a hamburger or something, just whatever movement he was doing, just eliminate that from his movements and going forward. Because that just sucks. When a player gets hurt like that in practice, I mean, we're talking about practice, Sam.
Not a game.
That's the most overused quote, joke thing.
No, it is. But at the time, I thought it was okay. People just flipped out about it. I was like, this is fine.
And I just remember when LeBron James did it one time at a press conference, and just looking back, watching it years later, everybody there was some laughter from the press, but he thought it was the funniest thing in the world, and Dwayne Wade was next to him, giggling like a little schoolgirl, and they were just giggling and thought it was so funny. But I think at the time maybe it was funnier than it is now. Now it's just worn out. Anyways, all right, Sam. Without looking at the stats from Drew Bennett, look at the wall or just look at your feet. Look somewhere else.
Yeah.
How many fantasy points do you think Drew Bennett put up in that game against Kansas City?
We already read his stat line, which I don't remember, but I would guess
that's what I'm trying to get you.
You talking
5 seconds.
40,
5,
45?
3.
45.
You almost
40.
had it. It was 47.3.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And see, we remember these, I think, often too in December because of fantasy football. I mean, I just feel like gaudy stat lines stay with me more when they happen at the end of the year. And especially when they happen. Now, this wasn't in the playoffs. And as I said, this particular year in our league, when I had Drew Bennett, I didn't make the playoffs. But I still feel as though I remember that more. I'm more likely to remember that than I would have been if the game had been in September.
Yeah. I mean, so, and I'm looking at his stats for the whole year. He there's a chance he was on most fantasy teams. He was on your fantasy team. I'm not sure if you drafted him or you picked him up during the year, but he didn't have eye-popping stats throughout the year. And I'm going to give you the total for this 3-game stretch we're talking about. I'll give you that total after we're done. But needless to say, he made up a big chunk of his season output in this 3-game stretch. Before that, I think he might have been on the waiver wire in some leagues. And I don't think, he was a player that they were talking about on those talking head shows like NFL Live, or he wasn't a notable player. But this 3-game stretch just elevated him greatly and made, as you alluded to, made him a lot of money. But we already touched on Billy Volek for that game, so maybe let's just go to the next game, okay? It's another loss for Tennessee, as I already said. They were at Oakland, and I believe, was that when Jerry Rice was playing for the Raiders?
2004 probably was, right? Or was he on the Seahawks by then?
The glory days of I think he had moved on. Looks like Jerry Porter had a monster game.
Ooh,
Oh
yeah,
God.
Jerry Porter.
Oh my God. 13 targets.
Jerry Porter, a very 2000s player.
Yeah. Okay, so there was no Jerry, no Tim Brown, so I guess he was like the number one. He had 13 targets, 8 receptions, 148 yards, and 3 touchdowns. This is Jerry Porter. Kerry Collins had himself a day as well. 21 completions, only 21 completions, but he had 371 passing yards and 5 touchdowns.
Oh my!
And Doug Gabriel caught one. The rest of the guys probably don't remember them. Teo Johnson with a touchdown. I don't even know who that is. Zach.
What's the first name?
Teo. Teyo.
Yeah. That vaguely rings a bell. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Okay.
So in this game, Drew Bennett once again received 17 targets. Okay, so 2 weeks in a row, and he had 13 catches for 160 yards and 2 touchdowns, which compared to the last game doesn't seem as gaudy, but that's still a huge game. That's like
it's still incredibly gaudy.
Yeah, 13 for 160 and 2 touchdowns. The funny thing is that I think Jerry Porter had a better game fantasy-wise, but it's just I don't remember Jerry Porter ever having that kind of game.
Right.
But he did. It's right there in front of me. And it also beside Drew Bennett, the great Derek Mason had 17 targets.
By the way, can I give you a 2000s Raiders player that's just going to take you back?
Oh yes, do it.
Speaking of Jerry Porter,
please.
Justin Fargas.
Oh.
Remember that guy?
Was he was like a little water bug, wasn't he?
I think he was a bigger back.
Oh, okay. I don't really remember him that well then.
Let's see. Let's look him up. Sometimes I just like to throw out these names from the 2000s. Sorry, continue while.
No, I love it. There were so many gaudy stats in this game. So Mason had 9 for 121 and a touchdown. I believe that it was a tight end, Ben Troop. I think he was a tight end. 9 targets, 6 catches, 75 yards, touchdown. And Billy Volek orchestrating it all like a conductor, classical music conductor, just a maestro. 40 completions on 60 attempts. Not great, but pretty good. Actually, that's pretty damn good. That's a good. That's like what 66% completion. 492 passing yards, Sam.
Oh my!
Almost got to 500. And he had 4 touchdowns, only 1 pick. Just a great game from Billy.
So this is week 14?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is the first round of the fantasy playoffs. I'm sure there are people in our league who may have benefited from parts of this game.
I think Pete had him. I think Pete might have had him. I just kind of remember that, but I could be wrong. But oh my goodness, I think we actually were counting passing yards. We're doing 10 for every 10 passing yards. We were giving a point maybe at that point.
Oh really? Yeah.
That might, because at a certain point we switched over. Maybe we already switched over, but just think of what kind of line fantasy. Think of all the fantasy points that he generated, if that was the case.
Absurd. Yeah.
We were definitely doing 6 points per touchdown pass.
Touchdown, right? For touchdown passes, yeah.
So he had a huge game. Won some people, or got some people in the playoffs, I should say. I didn't win them leagues, but oh man, really fun to look back at. So that's kind of like that. Those are the 3 games I wanted to focus on. But let me give you the totals for those three
Okay.
games for each guy. Okay, just to put it
Yeah.
in perspective, and then I'm going to give you, Sam. I'm going to give you per 16 games if they play this way. If they could have just kept the genie in the bottle, so to speak, or let it out of the bottle for all those 16 games, and just the magical connection could have kept going. I'm going to give you what they would have put up. All right. So in those three games, Billy Volek, the great Billy Volek, threw for 1,187 yards.
Okay.
Okay. 11 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Okay. For a quarterback rating of 109.8. All right.
Yep.
So that's pretty damn good. The first game in that stretch was only 269 yards, kind of brought down the yardage a little bit. But Sam, if he had performed well, I mean, he was still averaging 396 yards passing during that stretch, and 4 touchdowns a game. So that's still really nice. He also got sacked 15 times. He was getting sacked 5 times a game during that stretch as well. But Sam,
that's a pace as well. That you gotta take in. He'd be on pace to see sacked 80 times in a season.
Yes, and if he had kept that pace up, Sam, he would have thrown for 6,331 yards in a whole season and 59 touchdowns. All right.
So just shattering all of those records that Peyton set in 2013.
Well, how many did Peyton throw for? He was it 57?
50. I want to say 55.
Okay, we're going to do a Peyton pod for that season. I mean, I want to do a career pod for him and also just focus on that season because
I was looking at this recently. I was looking at it recently. 4 receivers, four pass catchers, I should say, on that team had double-digit touchdowns.
I don't think it's ever been done.
No, and I'm not sure it'll ever be done again, honestly. It just sucks. I mean, I think it was probably not a great matchup for them to play the Seahawks in that Super Bowl, but it would have been interesting to see them not have to play in a 20-degree game.
Yeah.
Right? Now, of course, people say, well, that's part of the game. You have to play in the cold. Peyton never plays well in the cold. Well, that's fine, except we're talking about the Super Bowl. We're not talking about the AFC title game in New England or in Pittsburgh. Like, you have the freaking Super Bowl in warm weather. Anyway.
No, I agree. I totally agree with you.
That should have been a really good game, and the weather, fucked it up.
I know. I don't like when that happens. I mean, unless it's two teams that are, just defensive and then kind of ground and pound, it's not fair. It was definitely an advantage for the Seahawks. And, yes, I do have an affinity for Peyton, mainly his stats. As a person, I'm a little bit on the fence. But as in terms of his stats, I drafted him many years in fantasy, and he was so consistent, and it was so much fun to watch. What he did at the line, all the little short passes, all the stats that were accumulated. I definitely have a special place in my heart for Peyton.
Yeah.
So we'll get to him at some point. We'll devote multiple podcasts to him. He deserves it, of course.
Well, yeah, and if you're I have a couple stats and some nuggets to throw at you. I don't want to cut you off though. If you're while you wax poetic on Billy Volek. So, but
go ahead. I
do have a couple things to throw at you. Well, we can wrap up. Billy.
Okay. Well, that's Billy. We wrapped him up. Okay, but now let me give you this is Gaudy when you look at Drew Bennett's 3-game stretch.
Yes.
This is Sam. Oh man, you look at if he could have kept up the pace, Sam. If they could have just kept up this pace the whole year, 16 games. What could have been? It could have been a record-breaking season for Drew Bennett.
Yeah.
But for that 3-game stretch, he had 28 receptions on 40 targets, 517 yards. And remember, his total was 1,247. So he gets 517 yards in those 3 games.
Yeah.
And Sam, his total touchdowns for the season were 11. He had 8 touchdowns, Drew Bennett did, in these 3 games. So
remarkable.
A huge percentage of his total touchdowns were accumulated in these 3 games.
Uh-huh.
It's a hell of a stretch. It's one of those kind of all-time 3-game stretches. It'd be kind of fun to look back and see some other great 3-game stretches. My boy Jerry Rice would be up there.
Yeah, you just gave me the perfect segue, Finn.
Okay. Well, hit me.
All right. Well, I am licking my wounds from a fantasy title week defeat.
Tough
which
loss.
happens, you know. I
Hard
mean,
luck.
look, everyone's been on either end of that, but in my case, I was almost single-handedly felled by Todd Gurley the second. He's not Todd Gurley the first, in case you were confused. He's Todd Gurley the second.
I was confused.
Or actually, he might be Todd Gurley the third. I can't remember. He's either the second or the third. I don't know which part of the royal line of Gurleys.
Or the seventh.
He is.
Maybe
yeah, or the seventh. Who knows? But
the eighth.
Todd Gurley in our league scoring system, Ben, had 49 points this weekend.
And the week before he had an incredible amount too, right?
Well, that was what I was going to mention, is that you're talking about 3-week totals. I want you to take a guess at, in our system, how many points do you think that Todd Gurley had in the in the fantasy playoffs in weeks 14 to 16?
Well, okay, so since I didn't make the playoffs in our league, I've been playing a little DFS. So I've seen some of his totals. He's been a monster, and I, in my great wisdom, have not played him in any of these weeks where he's blown up. But I have seen some of his totals. I'm going to guess in our system, and we have kind of a different system than other leagues. We do 0.2 points per carry, which I think is good because, you know, when like a quarterback is running out the clock, they'll kneel and they'll be, -1 yards. And there's been times where people have lost their fantasy matchup because of that. Crazy as it sounds. So I'm going to say, you're asking me how many he got total or per game, like average?
In weeks 14, 15, and 16.
Okay.
How many did he get total?
I'm going to say 120.
That is an excellent guess, Ben. He got 126.3, which I can't tell you on offhand that is the record, but for a 3-week total, playoff total for a player in the history of fantasy football, but I have to think it's close for a skill position player. It might be the record. He had in that stretch, he scored 8 touchdowns. Last week, as I said, he had 49 fantasy points. I lost by 7.5. So he really did. He really did carry the week. But there's no shame in losing to Todd Gurley because he's a great player. You know, it's not like there was the year that Jerome Harrison blew up in week 15 or week 16 here I am again getting back to the Browns, but he was on the Browns and he had like 220 yards rushing in week 16. That's the kind of thing where if you lose a trophy because of that, I think you're more within your right to be a little salty because it's like, well, Jerome Harrison is just not. Come on, give me a break. But Gurley, he is a great player. He had 22 carries for 118 yards. He had 10 catches for 158 yards and 2 touchdowns.
God.
The play of the day, though, the play of this game, and maybe the defining play of Todd Gurley's season, is his 80-yard touchdown reception, which, if you haven't watched it, I would urge anyone and everyone to go watch that. It is, for my money, been one of the top 5 plays of the year in the NFL. He gets a screen pass. It's like 2nd and 11. He gets a screen pass, and about 10 yards down the field, maybe 20 yards down the field, he accelerates in a way that I honestly don't know if I've ever seen a running back accelerate before.
I'm watching it right now. I'd seen it before, but I'm watching it again. You're right.
Like,
wow.
I mean, it's like a, you know, in Madden they have the turbo button or whatever, in Tecmo Bowl and video games. It's like watching someone hit the turbo button in real life, in a real game. I mean, just an unbelievable play. I got a little bit of trivia for you though, Simmons, because he had 118 yards on the ground and 158 yards through the air. So he had 100 and 100, right?
I love when that happens.
Can you name me the last player to get 100 yards rushing and 100 yards receiving?
The last player to do it.
Yeah.
I want to say Alvin Kamara. I want to say Alvin Kamara, but
Kamara is actually a good guess based on what he's been doing, but it's not him.
Yeah, I assumed it probably wasn't him. It's probably somebody who did it like a little farther back in history. Oh God, let me just think about this, because there's a lot of names just blowing through my head right now.
Yeah, and you know, as you think about this, you know, I think it is worth mentioning. This is someone, I mean, obviously you need someone who gets a lot of volume, right? There are a lot of players out there who get one or the other, but they need the touches to get both. So I went back and looked into the annals of post-2000 football history and found a player.
Okay, so let me just throw it out there. Priest Holmes.
Sure. Priest Holmes is a great guess. Now, I think Priest Holmes did do it a couple times.
Oh, wait.
He's not the person to do it most recently.
Let me guess again. Deshaun Foster.
You know, I can't speak for whether he has ever done it or not, but it's not quite that far back.
All right, just hit me with it.
Okay.
Wait, not Deshaun Foster, the guy the running back for the Texans, the longtime running back who
Arian Foster.
Arian Foster.
Arian Foster is right, Ben. Well done.
I think I had him that
Good job.
game. I think I had him. He had 100 yards receiving in the first half.
Well, here's the funny thing about that. That was a weekend, a fateful weekend. This happened on October 23rd, 2011. That was a fateful weekend when you were in town for a certain wedding in Houston. It was that Sunday.
Really?
Yeah. It was against the Titans. He had over 100 and over 100 receiving and over 100 rushing. I don't have it off the top of my head. But it's the first time in 6 years that someone has done that in a professional football game.
Wow, I thought it would be more recent. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, I thought so too, but Le'Veon Bell had never done it. I thought maybe Jamal Charles would have done it. As I said, it's just one of those, you know, it's a running back like Darren Sproles. He's had over 100 yards receiving a bunch of times, but he's not going to get over 100 on the ground just because he didn't get the ball enough, you know?
No,
so
that's true, yeah.
This is a stat that is reserved for people who are getting 25, 30 touches a game reliably. The true bell cows, Ben. The true bell cows of our time. But anyway, so first time since 2011 a player's gone for over 100 in rushing and receiving. First time since 1986 that a player has gone over 100 rushing and over 150 receiving. I mean, he had 10 for 158 and 2 touchdowns.
The receiving numbers are crazy.
He had what would be a good line for Antonio Brown as a receiver.
Yeah.
You know?
And only on 13 targets, too.
Yeah. And so now he has almost gotten 100 points in the last 2 weeks. And in the process, Ben, he has quietly, or maybe not so quietly, catapulted himself into having one of the best running back seasons in recent memory.
Yeah.
Todd Gurley
Looking at it right
has
now.
in our scoring system 407 points. As you said, we're in a half PPR. The only quirk is that we get 0.2 per carry, which is supposed to reward touches. I mean, I definitely think it's a little different. I have never come across another league that does it like that.
Yeah.
We put it in, I think, originally as a way to kind of counterbalance the pass catching element.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah.
Now, of course, someone might say, well, if you're trying to counterbalance catches with half PPR, why don't you just do a standard league? That's a fair question, but this is just how we do it, right? This is how
I like it.
we have done it now for about 10 years. It is a little frustrating, I would say, when you get a player who has, let's say, 18 carries for 40 yards, and you're getting, I mean, that player gets 3.6 players for touches, and you're kind of thinking, should he really be rewarded for 18 touches when he was getting 2 yards a carry? But nevertheless, that's how we play, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If you look at our stats, going back to, I believe we introduced this in 2008, it will show each year. So I decided, when I had some time on my hands, I decided to go through and look. All right? Todd Gurley's at 407 right now. Le'Veon Bell has never broken 400. His best is 395, and he's unlikely to break 400 this year. David Johnson last year for the Cardinals had 426.
Wow.
So Todd Gurley needs 19 points to match David Johnson's year last year. Before that, the last 400 year, the year that AP ran for 2,000 yards, which is 2012, he didn't get to 400 because he just didn't have the receptions, right?
Yeah.
The last year before that someone got to 400 was Arian Foster in 2010, which was the year before he did the 100 and 100 we mentioned. He got to 424. So Gurley would need 17 in week 17 against the Niners to match that. But if he can get to 20 points, Ben, he would have the best running back total for a season in our scoring system since the famed 2009 season for Chris Johnson, where Chris Johnson had 2,509 all-purpose scrimmage yards. He had 441 points in our system, right? Now, this led me down a little bit of a rabbit hole into some all-time great running back seasons, right?
Yeah.
I decided to go through and look first in our league, and then more broadly, sort of some all-time numbers with using the 400-point mark as a benchmark.
Yeah.
So, right. So you go back to our league, and I had data in there since 2003. But for the first 5 years of the league, I had to take the point total, and then I had to look at the amount of carries, and I just multiplied that by 0.2 because I'm so cool and have the time to do this at this moment. And that gave me the average, right?
Yeah.
So here's some gaudy stats for you, right? I've harped on the Browns and on Rudy Johnson being a terrible pass catcher and on Braylon Edwards. So now we're gonna get some. I'm gonna get real gaudy here for you for a second, okay?
I love it.
Larry Johnson, 2005 season, 400.7 points. Larry Johnson, 2006, 423.7.
Yeah.
Steven Jackson's 2006, 429.2. Sean Alexander's 2005, where he had 27 touchdowns, 432.5. Priest Holmes' best season of all time was 2003. He had 472 points. Okay. Marshall Faulk's best season, the 2000 MVP season we referred to a couple weeks back, 474 points as a running back.
He had some 100s, didn't he? He had some 100s.
Oh, I'm sure he did. I'm sure if you looked at his game log, he had at least one of those. Right.
Oh, yeah.
Emmitt Smith, best season ever as a fantasy back, in what would have been in our system, 1995, 457 points. Barry Sanders, surprisingly, never would have gotten to the 400 mark. As many incredible plays as he had.
Not a lot of receptions.
What's that?
I don't think he got a lot of receptions. I think that's probably
That's
why.
exactly right. He didn't get enough receptions to really be in that conversation. Terrell Davis's 1998 Broncos season, his best season as a Bronco, 447.4, right?
Damn.
So Todd Gurley is entering some sort of rarefied air here. But then,
Hit me.
this is all a lead up to what I discovered was the best season of all time by a running back, in my opinion.
Oh boy!
Right?
Oh boy!
Okay.
Oh.
Now, do you want to guess the player who I'm referring to when I talk about this? Do you want to guess the player here, the running back?
Jim Brown.
It is not Jim Brown. It's more current than that. But Jim Brown was certainly a hoss. He was certainly a workhorse.
Let me just give it 1 minute of thought here. The best fantasy season of all time by a running back.
I would argue
Surprised
based
it's not
on
Marshall Faulk, honestly.
Based on the average of the position, I would argue it could be argued it's the best fantasy season by any player of all time.
Oh man. Let me guess. LaDainian Tomlinson. Want to hit one of those?
LaDainian Tomlinson is right. Look
Oh.
at you. You got Arian Foster and LT. You are in fuego this morning.
Well,
Tim.
it took me like three guesses.
Well, look, don't worry about that part,
Foster.
okay?
Yeah.
Listen, all that matters is that you got it right.
Oh.
And you did guess Deshaun Foster at first, but that's fine. Your heart was in the right place. You in your mind you knew the answer. And you know the answer here.
Give me the season totals. I want to hear. I want to hear the carries. I want to hear the yards. I want to hear the receptions.
Yeah. Okay.
I want to hear
go.
the touchdowns.
Okay.
Just cover me in stats.
348 rushes in 2006.
Jesus. What?
For 1,858 yards.
Damn.
Sorry, not 1858, 1815. 28 touchdowns, rushing touchdowns. Okay?
Oh, God.
56 catches, 508 yards, and 3 touchdowns.
Those rushing touchdowns just put it over the edge.
Let me read that again. 1815, 28 receiving, 508, 1815 rushing, 28 rushing, 508 receiving, 3 touchdowns receiving. He had 31 total touchdowns, which is 11 more than he got in any other season in his career.
What year was
that? His point total, 2006. His point total for the year been 512 points from a running back.
Damn.
He had 38 more points than the second best running back season of all time in our fantasy scoring system. To equal that output, Todd Gurley would need 105 points next week.
And he's going to probably get rested, it looks like. They might rest all their starters. So
and that would be the sensible thing, though for us, we would miss out on potentially tying and getting into some truly elite territory for a running back. But there was the year that Peyton Manning in our system, his 2013 year, he had 638 points in a year, so he had 126 more points than LaDainian did. Yeah. But I personally think that as much as the NFL has become a passing league, and you look at even the stats of someone like Breeze, or I tried to say Brady and Breeze, and I said Breeze.
You're probably getting
look
hungry.
At the stats of
braising some food.
That's true. Yeah, braising a nice pork shoulder.
Yeah.
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 Oh yeah. But I just don't think that I can say that a quarterback had the best fantasy season of all time, just because by definition in our system, QB lines are just more likely to be a little gaudier because the QBs just score more. So that's taking nothing away from Peyton's 2013 season. 638 points is insane. Like, just absolutely, gaudy any way you slice it. That being said, I mean, essentially he got 40 points a game for 16 games, right? 16 times 40 is 640. So he basically got 40 points a game for 16 games. My personal opinion, though, is that if you look at that based on the average quarterback that year and their output, and you look at LaDainian based on an average running back, I think that 512 from a running back, I don't think that's ever going to be broken. And I think you can make a very compelling case that it is the best fantasy season in the history of the NFL, in the history of fantasy sport, in the history of fantasy football.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm with you.
Anyway, just a a gaudy line, 512 points. LaDainian Tomlinson, first ballot. I think he was a first ballot Hall of Famer. If not, he should have been.
Yeah.
The best running back of the 2000s. I looked it up. He had 3,000 more rushing yards in the 2000s than the next best running back.
Crazy. The stats he put up are just insane.
And I knew he was good. I never had him in fantasy, and he was on a Chargers team that, those were some good teams. The year that he did this actually was the year that they went 14-2, and they lost to the Patriots in the playoffs in a kind of a weird, strange game. They lost at home as the 1 seed, but because I never had him on my fantasy team, and because they weren't one of the marquee NFL teams, just generally, and perhaps as a result, if he played on the Cowboys, it would have been different, or if he played on the Niners or the Steelers. I guess I just did not realize I knew he was good, but I did not realize statistically how truly incredible he was. I mean, LaDainian Tomlinson, one of the best running backs of all time.
Truly, yeah. I mean, he
one of the best running backs of all time, and let me pull up a couple of stats here. Sorry, some dead air.
Oh no,
a couple of career stats. Let's see. Well, LaDainian Tomlinson is 6th all-time in rushing yards. Was actually just in the last few weeks passed by Frank Gore.
Interesting.
He's 6th all-time in rushing yards. He is 2nd all-time in rushing touchdowns with 145. Emmitt Smith is first with 164. But by comparison, the active player that is closest to LT is Adrian Peterson, and he has 99. So Adrian Peterson would need 46 more touchdowns to get to LT. He's not going to play that long, right? Marshawn Lynch after that with 81. So he would need 64 to tie LT. Not going to happen.
Nope.
Frank Gore has 77. Frank Gore has just over 50% as many rushing touchdowns as LT had. I mean, this guy is just like he was incredible, and
he really was. So many receptions.
My gushing about LaDainian Tomlinson is done. One final thing I'll give you, Ben.
More
to look out for this week. Looking at the sort of statistical. We're coming up on the end of the season. The statistical lines for 2017 will be set in stone after week 17, obviously.
Yep.
Okay. DeAndre Hopkins, who had an incredible touchdown catch on Christmas Day. The Texans were dreadful, but he had one of the catches of the year in the end zone where he tipped it to himself and then kneed Joe Hayden in the face on the way down and caught the ball. DeAndre Hopkins for the season, 96 catches, 1,378 yards, 13 touchdowns. All right? If he has 4 catches and 122 yards in Week 17, they play at the Colts, and T.J. Yates is throwing it to him, so there's no guarantee here. But if he were to get 122 yards and 4 catches, he would have, for the second time in 3 seasons, he would have reached the benchmark of at least 100 catches, at least 1,500 yards, and double-digit touchdowns. All right,
wow.
He would have done that for the second time in 3 seasons. Do you know how many times? I want you to take a guess at how many times not Antonio Brown. How many times Julio Jones has done that?
I'm going to say 0.
Julio Jones has done it 0 times. What about AJ Green?
I would say 0.
0 is correct. What about Des Bryant?
0. I don't think these guys don't get enough receptions.
0 is correct. What about Odell Beckham?
Ooh. I would say maybe he's done it. Yeah, I would say, just to shake things up, I'm going to say yes, he's done it.
He has never done it.
Damn.
He has never done it. the only how many times do you think Jerry Rice did it?
Oh boy. I'm gonna say twice.
Twice is a great guess. He did it twice. You're correct. There were a couple years where he had like 14. There was one year where he had like 1,499 yards, and another where he had like 98 catches. So it was just on the cusp. Andre Johnson never did it. Randy Moss did it once. Terrell Owens never did it. Antonio Brown has done it 3 times.
Wow.
So like this is like pretty elite territory we're talking about.
Yeah.
Now obviously those are arbitrary numbers, and
he's doing it with like T.J. Yates and
he's doing it with he only played
Tom
with Deshaun
Savage.
Watson for like I think he only played with Deshaun Watson for I think 6 games. So just an incredible season from DeAndre Hopkins. Sure to go into to be a pretty highly drafted receiver next year with Deshaun Watson back healthy. But will be interesting to see because that would be quite a benchmark to set. He's still only 25 years old, and really has just had a phenomenal bounce back season after.
No, I'm looking at his stats
after
last
getting
year.
Brock Osweiler last year.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy, and this is the same for Todd Gurley too. The bounce back from the previous year is kind of astounding. I think it's been talked about a lot, but yeah, Hopkins only had 950 yards receiving, 954 last year on 78 catches. He played all 16 games, only 4 touchdowns. And this year, as you said, so far with Week 17 still to play, 96 catches, 1,378 yards, and 13 touchdowns. So I think they're going to be feeding him the ball a lot that game. Hopefully he'll get that. He'll pass that benchmark. That'd be awesome to see. I'm going to be looking out for that. And Todd Gurley, I was looking at his stat. Yeah, he's got 2,093 yards from scrimmage already. So
so if he could somehow, if they played him and he got 417 yards from scrimmage, he would break Chris Johnson's 2009 mark.
Yeah.
If he gets 20 fantasy points in our system, he will have the best fantasy season from a running back since Chris Johnson.
I hope that happens. But like just like Hopkins though, last year Todd Gurley. Okay, so this year he had 279 rushes for 1,305 yards, 13 touchdowns. Last year he had almost the same number of rushes, 278 for. So this year 279, last year 278. And last year he had 885 rushing yards. And 6 touchdowns. So he was.
And what's the difference between those teams? Can you tell me the difference between those teams?
There's probably some offensive line or a scheme. Why is it a different fullback?
Well, I was gonna say.
Oh no, Jeff Fisher.
Jeff Fisher.
It's probably true, man. I mean, it probably wasn't as exciting and varied as a playbook as they have now. And Jared Goff is also taking a step forward and kind of.
I mean, the Rams were awful last year, and
so
recently
bad.
Fisher said, "I think I left them in pretty good shape." Jeff, I have news for you. What they have done this year is not
has
a
nothing
positive
to do
reflection
with you.
on you
it's
at
like,
all.
It
actually shows how bad of a coach you were.
I mean, it's kind of like. I mean, this isn't as extreme. I agree with you, but it's like the Warriors. To go in the NBA for a second, it's like when Mark Jackson left the Warriors and Steve Kerr came in and totally like revolutionized. Didn't revolutionize things really.
Wait, you think this is more or less extreme than that?
I think this is I would say probably this is a little less extreme.
Yeah, I actually disagree on that. I think this is more extreme because that Warriors team, if I'm not mistaken, didn't they don't get me wrong. Clearly, Mark Jackson did not get the most out of that team, but I thought they had like 52, 53 wins. Weren't the Rams like 4-12? Like they're going from 4-12 to 12-4. And I mean, Todd Gurley, he's using him as a receiving back. I mean, he would just basically. I know they got some offensive line guys, and I know what you're saying, but in a lot of ways, this 31-year-old dude, this guy who's like in our age range, has taken this team and
it's crazy
and basically flipped their record and won the division for the first time in 15 years.
Yeah.
Or 14 years.
And you can see that Gurley
I
has
would
been
argue
involved
that
more receptions
it's
too.
Amazing. Yeah.
43 receptions to 64.
Yeah. And we don't want to like overlook how good Sean McVay has been, because he's been an awesome coach, and I really think, getting back to talking about Jimmy Garoppolo last week,
oh yeah,
this is going to be a fun division for years to come. And not that Seattle, the Patriots, I think, taught us we shouldn't sort of assume that a team who's had a good run and a dynasty and who has a good quarterback, we shouldn't assume that their run is over before it is necessarily. So, until the Seahawks, as long as the Seahawks have Russell Wilson, I'm not going to be assuming that they're going to kind of fall off of a cliff or anything. They had a huge win in Dallas last week.
Yeah, they could reload.
I didn't expect them to win that game at all. I mean, they're banged up. The Cowboys had Elliott back, and they won what was essentially a de facto playoff game. That being said, the Rams-Niners upcoming rivalry with Goff and Garoppolo and McVay and Shanahan.
It's gonna be fun.
I mean, I think that's going to be sort of a throwback to the 70s and 80s when the Rams and the Niners were the best teams in the NFC West, and I think it'll be a fun division, and the future is bright for both of those franchises. Your boy Jimmy G winning another game against an AFC playoff team, and the AFC 3 seed.
Diced up the best defense in the NFL. Diced them up like he was a Benihana chef.
That's right.
Chop, chop,
Jimmy
chop.
Hanna.
Jimmy Hanna. Oh, God, that's good. No, I love Jimmy G. I'm head over heels. I can't even put my thoughts together about him. I mean, they got to sign him right now. I don't know what they're. Maybe there's some delay from Jimmy's agent, or maybe they won't wait to the end of the year or something. But
yeah,
make sure he's healthy.
Would you say that when you watch Garoppolo play, something happens and you're head over heels?
Says da-na-na-na, and I'm head over heels. Na-na-na. Are you talking about the Tears for Fears song?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great song. I love that.
You know it. You know it.
Good reference. But just to go back for a second, talking about, I don't want to get too into the NBA, but I think you're right. Like, upon further reflection, like the dramatic switch that the Rams experienced this year is pretty. It's more dramatic than the Warriors, but I will say that what happened with the Warriors is a mixture of like the players developing, and I think actually Mark Jackson did good things for player development. Like, he helped, Steph Curry like famously get more confident and like more of a killer instinct and things like that. Same with Klay Thompson, gave those guys a lot of confidence. But like going from like a playoff team who's losing in the second round to like a championship contender in 1 year with a new coach.
Oh, for sure.
I feel like it's a pretty big leap.
No, and the Rams haven't even played a postseason game yet.
Yeah.
So the Warriors have now won 2 of the last 3 titles. Arguably, if things had bounced a little differently, could have won 3 in a row.
Yeah. And I mean, like, inserting like Draymond Green in the starting lineup when he was like riding the bench. He wasn't riding the bench, but he was like a bench guy. Taking David Lee out of the starting lineup and relegating him to the bench, which is at the time like, what the hell are they doing? But a lot of the moves that were made were pretty dramatic, and but at the same time, I'm gonna revise what I said, and I'm gonna agree with you that this Rams team,
but on the other hand, Robert Woods.
I know. Robert Woods, what is happening with him?
I don't really have anything else other than his name, Robert Woods, but that guy
revelation.
That guy, is actually an important player to them, kind of.
Yeah.
And I mean, you look at these receivers, but it's the same idea. I mean, there is sort of some similarity there you're talking about, where like you get these guys on the Warriors and they're gonna do better and play better and be a more significant and contributing piece than they would be on a lot of other teams. I think the same is true with Robert Woods and someone like Cooper Kupp. Not that they couldn't be good in other offenses, but I can damn well tell you that they would not be as good if Jeff Fisher were their coach.
You're damn right about that. That we can definitely agree on that.
Yeah.
The coaching has been amazing there. The offense has been stunning. I can't even. There's been I feel like I totally missed the boat on that team this year. There's been so many times in DFS where I could have played a player. I was like, oh, they're the Rams. You know, there's just something in the back of your head like, oh, it's the Rams. You know, they had one good week, or they're having like a nice week, but they're going to get crushed by, you know, fill in the blank opponent. You know, like, oh, you know, this team's has traditionally been better than the Rams, so I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna insert this Rams player into my lineup. But it's just been every week they've been surprising. They've dominated teams they've been dominating teams that you never would have thought they would dominate.
I mean, their losses are they lost to the Eagles at home when
they almost lost to the Niners.
They did, yeah.
Brian Hoyer-led Niners.
That was actually ended up being a fun Thursday night game.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
But they lost to the Eagles at home, the game where Carson Wentz tore his ACL, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I mean, he had played most of the game in that game, so
that was a good win. That was a big win.
They lost to the Redskins at home. That's really the only head-scratching loss. They lost to the Redskins at home in week 2. There are other losses. Seahawks at home by 6, at the Vikings, and the Eagles at home.
Those are good losses to have. I mean,
yeah. I mean, like
quality.
They're 11-4. You know, something has to give this week with the Rams going for their 12th win and Jimmy Garoppolo putting his undefeated record as an NFL starter on the line.
Yeah, and I hope they sit all their players and Jimmy can get out of there.
I actually want to see them. I want to see them play their starters just so like.
I do too. I secretly do.
I want to see if Jimmy can beat their starters. I mean,
if
he beats their backups,
hot.
That just won't be as fun, right?
That's true. That's true.
Like, I don't know.
I think they're gonna rest their starters though. I mean, see, here's where I'm coming with that. I don't want to see him get hurt. He can still get hurt without that, but I just want him. I wanted them to win this last game, so he has an unblemished record. And I want to force the Niners' hand to sign this guy because I don't trust the Niners owner. I think he's a fool. He's a clown. Insert whatever derogatory, mean insult for somebody who's hapless and confused and just a joke. But I don't like him. Okay, just flat out. But I think John Lynch has made some good moves. I mean, obviously getting Jimmy is about all. I mean, if that's all he does for his whole career, it could be a franchise-altering move. But I just want Jimmy to be healthy too, because the guy has some injuries in the past. He looks a little fragile back there. So I hope he gets out safe. But yeah, I mean, it'd be more entertaining to have this red-hot Niners team with nothing to lose to go against this not undefeated, but kind of like offensive juggernaut Rams team. And it could be a high-scoring affair considering the Niners just gave up a bunch of points last week to the Jaguars. So we'll see, man. I'm excited.
It'll be fun. It'll be a fun game.
Yeah.
So.
I hope so too. Well, oh man, this has been a large, delicious feast of a podcast.
Absolutely.
Samuel, thanks for coming on again. Talk to you soon, man. Hope you had Hope you had a great Christmas and
you as well. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas to all of the Gaudy Stats listeners out there. We will reconvene in the new year.
We will. We shall. All right, man. Enjoy yourself in Louisville. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, sir. Take care.
All right, bye.